It's nice and chilly and crisp in the air.
I'm learning something. I got to start this thing up, and we have to go on YouTube. And every time I've gone on YouTube so far, it starts it up on my computer. So I'm listening to me talk 2 minutes later.
Oh yeah, the delay. Mm-hmm.
Good morning, Dr.
We jumped off our call, so we're all jumping on. So I think everybody's going to be coming in right now.
This whole thing about Zoom and stuff, the other day, they were putting me in work groups and workrooms, which I thought, wow, who thought of this thing?
Yeah, breakout rooms. We do.
Yeah,
we
breakout.
use them all the time. Yep.
Well, we don't, and we don't want to get that big that we will.
Delegate Arntz, good morning. It's Donna Hanlon. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you this morning?
I'm good. When we get to the ESMAC portion of the agenda, would you have the ability to share your screen with the document that we sent you, or share?
I would prefer you share it if you have to go through it. I've given you the ability to share, and that way you can.
Dr. Andy's that ability to share?
I've given that to you, yes. Or I've given it, I can give it to you. I think we can give it to you.
Give it to Dr. Andy's, that would be great.
Dr. Andy's, okay.
We'll figure it out. Don't worry, we got it.
All right,
we got it. We'll figure it out. We'll get it done.
Thank you.
It's amazing what I can make each and every one of you. I feel powerful here almost, I can mute you. I can make you a co-host. What's really become my biggest challenge is when we get up to do the Pledge of Allegiance to actually have my screen pick up the American flag.
Hey, cutie.
Oh, good morning. I hope that.
Good morning.
I appreciate
Oh,
that.
sorry. I'm teasing.
I thought somebody was talking to me.
Yes,
Yeah,
sir.
I was talking to all of you. Hey, Patty and John and Karen and everybody. Good morning. Who else is out there? Hey, Dave Bromwell and Melissa Kelly and Mike Arntz and Donna Hanlon. John,
So
thanks for being
we
with
are streaming already, correct?
Yeah, we
Yeah.
are. And if she
Okay.
breaks in the romper, stomper, bumper, I'm gonna leave. I'm gonna tell you right now.
It's Friday, everybody, and it's going to snow and clear the air. Woohoo!
We may. The other good thing about this is as soon as my clock turns to 9 o'clock, we start. So that's the great thing of having a computer right in front of you.
5, 4, 3.
You'll have the countdown. The ball will drop.
Yeah.
So how many cups of coffee did Addie have?
Did you count this morning?
No, I was not paying that much attention. but obviously too many.
You're right.
Morning, Mr. Chairman, Madam Secretary, John Andes and all.
Good
Good morning.
morning.
Good morning, Senator.
Morning, Senator.
Beautiful day at the beach.
All right.
Amen.
It looks like we've hit that bewitching hour of 9 a.m. If we could all rise to do the allegiance. Flag will appear in a second. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic
For which it stands, one nation, under
under
God,
God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Senator Eckhart, would you please lead us in prayer?
Thank you very much. If everybody could mute themselves, that would be great. Thank you very much. This is the day that the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. God, we are so thankful that we have this opportunity to gather here together with all of those who've traveled all the way up here to be with us, to deal with the difficult issues that we face in this most challenging time. We thank you that we do have the opportunity to work together with each other when we agree, when we disagree, and we know that each one of us has something special to contribute to that beautiful tapestry that we weave of life and of making legislation and meeting the needs of our citizens here in the state of Maryland and all the people who live within our boundaries and jurisdictions. So we praise you and thank you that you will be with us in our hearts, in our minds, that you give us ears to listen and those hearts to understand the intricacies of all of the issues we'll be dealing with this session. We thank you and praise you for this opportunity. Be with each one and give us your wisdom. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you, Senator, for the prayer. Just for the delegation, if we could all remember, if you have a question for anybody on the panel, please go to your screen and raise your hand. I'll try to get to people in order as best I can. The Senator asked if anybody out there, if we could all mute ourselves, that would be great to keep the extraneous noise. Briefly, I'd like to at least get a motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting.
So moved.
Okay, second.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you very much. That's great. All right, I guess first up, we have the Maryland Department of Education. Dr. Salmon, are you ready?
I am ready, sir, and good morning to everybody. It is good to see your smiling faces. It is Friday, but there's still a lot of work to do today. So I'm going to ask Zach Hans to share the screen so you can see our PowerPoint. And I'm going to begin just to say again, good morning. I'm going to give you just a brief overview on the status of our efforts to return students to school buildings for in-person instruction. And I'm going to give you lots of time to ask me questions. Next slide, please. As you know, for many months, I've been making the case that we must get our students back into the school buildings. The toll that distance learning has had on so many of our children has really been profound. Last week, I reiterated the call to actions for students to return to school no later than March 1st and announced that school systems should plan to return at least some students by utilizing their plans that they approved back in August. Many systems have already returned some students to school or plan to in the coming weeks. I've had the privilege of visiting several schools, particularly a number of schools on the Eastern Shore, as they operate under the new COVID guidelines. And I've been really impressed by the health and safety protocols and mitigation strategies they have in place. I'm looking forward to visiting more schools this spring to observe some of the innovative strategies our school systems have employed to ensure that every mitigation technique is in place to stop or slow the spread of the virus in any school building. Next slide, slide 3, please. Prior to the beginning of the school year, MSDE and the Maryland Department of Health issued several updates to the COVID guidance for the educational community. The guidance offered a variety of recommendations and strategies as school systems sought to prepare their buildings for a return to school, and also offered a number of considerations for how to logistically bring various groups of students safely in and out of the building. MSDE also released a recovery plan for education last summer, which was built with input from stakeholders, including teachers, among others, and local school superintendents, that outlined different hybrid learning models and provided recommendations for maintaining the continuity of learning and instruction, regardless of whether students were learning virtually or in a hybrid fashion during the pandemic. The plan also required each school system to develop their own local recovery plans, which had 13 required components and provided information on how they plan to reopen schools. As I mentioned earlier, these are the plans that have already been approved by the State Department and what school systems should be using to implement an upcoming move towards in-person instruction. Next slide, please. Last week, the Maryland Department of Health and MSDE also released updated guidance that includes 2 educational design options for local school systems to consider. We recommend the option that focuses on offering at least hybrid learning opportunities to all students and in-person learning opportunities for students with disabilities, special learning needs, difficulty with accessing virtual learning, English learners, as well as elementary students. Also, we have said many times that parents should have the opportunity to keep their children in a virtual environment if they feel more comfortable with doing so. So that is an option. But overall, our goal is to minimize further impacts from virtual learning for students who struggle significantly to thrive in that environment. Next slide, please. The impacts from almost a full year where most students have not seen the classroom have been significant. And the longer we keep students in a fully virtual environment, the greater these impacts will be. There's very clearly a direct correlation between this time of uncertainty in the virtual learning environment and the debilitating impacts from this extended period of disrupted instruction that students are experiencing. We've been working with the State Board of Education to develop a COVID dashboard, which houses a number of performance metrics about the first term of the school year, including student attendance and enrollment figures, that gives us a broader sense of what learning has looked like and where some of the greatest areas of need that must be addressed in the near future. Unfortunately, declines in enrollment and participation rates among students indicate that many times parents and families were frustrated by virtual learning. This could have resulted in parents taking their children out of public school and enrolling them in private school so that they could receive in-person opportunities, or resulted in some of the academic difficulties that have been seen with failure rates in several systems, many times what it has been year over year. We presented this information to the State Board last week, and it's available on the MSD website. We're happy to share it with the delegation after today's meeting. Next slide, please. It's difficult to fully quantify on a comprehensive scale the total academic impact of not having students in school for in-person learning, and it's going to be difficult to do this. But much of what we've seen written and said in journal articles and debates speak to learning loss. And I'm not sure that's really what we mean, that students have lost learnings that they had, or do we mean their education and their learning were disrupted and they may not have gained knowledge and skills at the rate that we would expect. To complicate this, actually determining how much learning students have lost or gained is difficult to tell. Some estimates indicate this could be 5 to 9 months of worth of learning loss, while our low-income students could be impacted more severely. On a national level, we really don't have a clear picture because state assessments were canceled last spring. As a part of our recovery plans, our local school systems were required to assess the needs of the student at the beginning of the year. All of our systems did that, but they weren't all able to use the same assessments, so we don't really have any state data to compare previous years. This is one of the main reasons it's crucial to get our students back in the classroom. I continue to hear from families, parents, and students alike who are desperate for a return to school due to the extreme challenges of learning successfully in a virtual setting. I'm also very, very concerned about our mental health issues. We know that our suicide rates across the country are up, and I hear from pediatricians across the state on a very frequent basis that they are seeing more cases of depression, anxiety, and also hospitalizations. Next slide, please. Across the United States, we experienced a surge of COVID cases late into the fall and through the early part of this winter. And thankfully, some of those numbers have started to improve. While Maryland's metrics hopefully continue to trend in the right direction, schools have consistently demonstrated in data from across the globe to not be identified as the source of super spreader events related to the virus. The student infection rate is significantly less than the community rate. A report recently released by the CDC notes that the type of rapid spread that was frequently observed in congregate living facilities or high density work sites has not been reported in education settings in schools. Maryland is far from the first state school system to work to bring students back. Thus far, a number of state and local systems across the nation have returned their students to school buildings, including in neighboring states like Delaware and West Virginia, and in large cities like New York. Seeing other large systems around the country open with success, including some of our neighbors, our focus must be to continue exacting every measure necessary to reinstate educational landscape in Maryland that provides in-person opportunities for students. Next slide, please. Late in December, I formally submitted a request to the Maryland Department of Health. The teachers and school staff and child care providers receive priority in the distribution of the vaccine for COVID-19. The governor announced earlier this month that these individuals would be included in phase 1B of the distribution plan for the vaccine. Since that announcement, I've been working closely with the team at the Maryland Department of Health to implement our plan to identify and efficiently vaccine educators and school staff across private and non-public schools, and also with child care providers. All local school systems are coordinating with local health departments and local hospitals to identify available vaccines for administration. Several systems have already begun vaccinating staff at this time, and I'm hopeful that we'll be able to complete this process swiftly. However, as I stated to your colleagues in the Ways and Means Committee on Wednesday, full receipt of vaccine by all school staff was never a prerequisite for returning to school. I saw last night that Baltimore City estimated about 80% of their residents would have the vaccine by early 2022. We could not wait that long to get our students back to school. Next slide, please. To aid in all these efforts, there's been a significant influx of funding to address critical areas of need as school systems tackle the endeavor of operating under COVID-19 restrictions and confront various challenges. The CARES Act, which was signed into law March 27th, provided significant amount of funding opportunities to our local school systems. The Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund provided $187 million directly to school systems in Maryland. The Governor's Emergency Education Relief Fund, totaling $35 million to support local systems, was used to support the development of wireless education networks, technology needs, and innovative solutions for connecting at-risk students. The relief funds, which comprised $210 million, included $100 million for technology advancement and $100 million for tutoring and learning loss mitigation efforts, with an additional $10 million for enhancing broadband access across our 24 local school systems. Recently, in the last week of December, the Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriations Act was signed into law and provides $780 million to our 24 local school systems for a wide range of allowable uses, including remediation of learning loss, implementation of summer learning programs, and purchasing educational technology. This is almost $1 billion in federal aid that has been allocated since March of 2020. Next slide, please. Additionally, on top of this, as part of the governor's fiscal year 2022 budget, he's allocated over $150 million for tutoring and supplemental instructions. We are strongly encouraging local school systems to use this available funding to implement evidence-based strategies such as extending and implementing high-intensity tutoring services to more students, establishing additional and extended summer learning programs, addressing social-emotional learning, and providing targeted academic acceleration to further mitigate the impacts from this disruption of instruction. These are all vital strategies in our efforts to combat the impacts of the pandemic on our students. The State Department is incredibly focused on distributing these funds to local school systems to bolster these programs, to limit learning loss, accelerate learning, and get our students back to school. We're also planning to vigorously monitor the expense of these funds to ensure that they are being used to implement the strategies that I've highlighted today. Next slide, please. There's still a lot of work left to do. MSDE and the State Board are going to continue to review strategies that can be considered on a statewide scale to lift all school systems in Maryland based on the data we've collected from the school systems through the COVID dashboard data points. Efforts to vaccinate all of our school staff, which some systems on the shore have already undertaken, will continue hopefully with haste. And finally, we need to begin the long, difficult process of identifying where our students are academically and social-emotionally after the long period of disrupted instruction. And with that, I turn it back to the chair, and I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any questions coming up yet. Or is there anybody out there looking to ask a couple questions?
Yes, Delegate Aaron's. I'd like to ask one question real quick.
Okay, hold on. I'll get to you. I think I have Speaker Pro Tem, Delegate Sample.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Dr. Salmon. With regards to the $150 million allocated for supplemental education loss and tutoring and things of that nature, I wanted to know, are you looking at all to the library system to be a part of this educational support system? Maybe, I know our local libraries are very active in education, and naturally they're under the education umbrella, but they offer tutoring, they offer that other level of support to our school system while kids are not physically in the school system. So how are they going to be engaged, if at all? Thank you.
Well, that is a great idea, and I had really not thought about that. So I think we'll definitely put that on our list to investigate. I know that during the beginning of the pandemic, our libraries were great in reaching out to provide some space for our students to learn, and also the tutoring. And so thank you for that suggestion, and I will certainly take that back as something we should investigate.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Delegate Mike Griffith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Secretary, for coming out and speaking to us. I've been working very hard since July trying to find a way to get kids back in school here in Harford and Cecil counties. And I was very grateful that the guidance was modified to eliminate the metrics, because I know our superintendent and Board of Education has been stating the metrics was preventing them from getting kids back in school. Since the announcement, now they've pivoted to the 6-foot rule. It's now the reasons we can't have kids back in school. Is there any intention or plans to modify that or create some wiggle room for our superintendents and Board of Education to be able to get our kids back in school within those guidelines, or even modifying those guidelines based upon the fact that circumstances have changed because of the vaccination?
Well, that's a great point, Delegate Griffith, and it has been my frustration that sometimes we have had various entities use those metrics really to keep our schools closed rather than to get them open, which is what they were intended to do. I think the guidance is very clear, and it says to the extent possible with the 6-foot rule. And I will call up the fact that I have been in many schools this fall where that's not always happening because it's not always feasible, but to the extent possible, we're distancing kids, as they come and go. But, when we're in a career and technology center and they're working on installing a brake, the kids are there with the brake installing it. So they're masked. They're washing their hands. So the other mitigation factors are very important that can be maintained all the time. But I think it's to the extent possible. And think about our childcare centers. We know that our kids are not walking around with yardsticks on either side of them to make sure they're distanced always 6 feet. It's to the extent possible. And to my colleagues here that will talk in a minute, maybe they want to address this, but it's common sense, really. To the extent possible, we can distance by 6 feet, we do. But when we can't, we're masking and washing our hands, etc. So I thank you for bringing that up, because I have had probably 400 emails in 2 days from Harford County parents on that various point.
And just one last thing, just to point out, from what I can tell in the conversations I've had, they interpret the extent possible as only allowing kids back in 1 day per week. So anything that can be done on that front would make a difference to everyone in Maryland. So thank you.
I will definitely, I've had plans to work with that particular school system. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, next up, we have Senator Steve Hershey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Dr. Salmon, you spoke a lot about the emotional consequences of students not being able to interact personally, not only with their instructors, but with their peers and other students as well. But at the last slide, you mentioned something about, I thought, beginning to understand what these effects might be, which leads me to the question of, are we not communicating and meeting and talking with these students currently about the effects of not being able to learn in person and what virtual learning is doing to them emotionally? Or is there some ongoing counseling or discussion with them that is going on already?
Well, thank you for clarifying that. We are definitely providing lots of technical assistance in terms of programs that are available that school systems can use. And I know all of the school systems, to the extent that they can, are having their counselors reach out to the students that they know that have ongoing mental health issues. What I'm talking about are the students that never have had mental health issues before until this particular situation. And those are the
Correct.
students that are not known to us. And that's who I'm really concerned about. And that's who I'm hearing about from pediatricians. These are the kids that normally got A's and B's, were involved in sports and really never had any anxiety or depression. And now they do. And so that's what we're trying to look at going forward. And I want to make sure that we put lots of funding towards getting more services for mental health. The problem with that, as you all know, and certainly Senator Eckert knows, we don't have the people to do it. And so I'm really going to look for lots of advice on this from maybe from our medical system that are training psychiatrists and school folks, school psychologists that maybe can work, part of their internship in our schools, because we really do need help.
Well, Dr. Salmon, with all due respect, unfortunately, your answer sounds like this is not being addressed right now. And it has been 12 months since students started learning virtually and not going into the classroom. And to blame this on funding, that's something we hear a lot down in Annapolis. But the reality is something needs to be done about this. And to just say, we're looking at ideas means that we've lost 12 months of not communicating with these students to figuring out what's really going on. And you're absolutely right. I'm sure it makes sense to talk to the students that have had mental health issues in the past, but all of these other students that you just mentioned that haven't had that but are feeling the adverse effects of virtual learning, it seems that they're being, I don't want to say ignored, but that's what it seems like. I mean, by not being out there and proactively communicating with these students, it seems like they're being left behind, and we're going to wait until some other, funding takes place or some other program or some other technical assistance. What about just the teachers being able to talk and communicate in person with these students? Is that not happening?
Yes, it is happening. And again, I think your local superintendents will tell you, I'm talking about the statewide, assistance and professional development that we put out. But your local, I said earlier, your local school systems, our superintendents can certainly address. They have the same concerns. We've talked about it every week when we have our phone calls. They're on top of it. It's just that it is a lot of students, and sometimes the teachers and the parents don't know about it. So it's going to be a thing that we're going to have to work on going forward. It's going to have to be all of our attention. When students come back, my opinion is that we need to spend the first couple of weeks working on their social emotional issues before we worry too much about academics.
All right, well, thank you. And Mr. Chairman, I hope that some of the superintendents can address this as well too. But thank you, Dr. Salmon.
I would agree with, we'll get to that. Okay, next up I have Johnny Mouts, delegate.
Thanks, Chairman. And Dr. Salmon, great to see you. Thanks for being with us this morning. This is kind of I'm going to take my delegate's label pin off and ask you, this is something that a lot of parents have asked me about. And there's a lot of interest into whether or not there are any discussions about having summer classes. And I know we're still going through assessing kind of where we are with our students, but if I was interested to know if there was any discussion about possibly extending the school year or having classes in the summertime. And if that's not happening right now, because I understand, I could assume that it probably isn't because of the day-to-day crisis that we're all dealing with COVID. You know, when would you predict, if there were a discussion about that, when it would occur?
Well, we certainly had that discussion with the state board last Monday, and that's one of our recommendations. We have a lot of research that supports extended learning time to be one way to really to deal with and to get students back on track. And I know that many of your superintendents have already made plans for summer schools or extended day programs. So it is definitely a plan, and I think it will be happening all across the state.
That clarifies it. Thank you.
All right, thank you, John. Next up, we have Delegate Adams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'll be brief. Good to see you, Dr. Salmon. Yesterday in our committee, we were in Economic Matters, and we heard House Bill 124, and it relates to OSHA requirements, workplace safety, all under the concept of COVID. And when we had the bill hearing, this was our first long bill hearing, but I had a lot of favorable, unfavorable testimony. But it appears to me that we're starting to set standards that are almost unachievable. And the legislature is at least considering some of these bills that are setting standards in the workplace that are almost unachievable from just this idea of COVID and making sure the environment's safe. And I was reading testimony from the Maryland State Education Association, the teachers union. And I don't know, in reading the bill and reading the testimony from the teachers union, how we would ever achieve a safe work environment. You're worried about trying to get students back to school as soon as possible. You could go the next 12 months and, we're not going to have vaccines in a way that's going to be satisfactory. And I'm just curious how you negotiate with the teachers union on this. And frankly, how can we help legislators? Because clearly students are being affected by this, and somehow we have to find a win-win solution. We have to develop a plan that gets students back in the classroom. Putting bills in onerous requirements on employers, whether it's in your industry and education, whether it's in construction or any trade, these actually work against the best interest of our state from a financial standpoint, from a mental health standpoint. And just curious, any thoughts on that? And then how do we kind of work through this in a very quick fashion?
Well, I couldn't agree more with all of your statements, and I think they are onerous. And I think from the research that we've seen, even from Harvard with some of the facility specialists there, continue to say that schools are clean and safe. And, some of the older buildings that may have air issues, there's very easy solutions to making sure ventilation can be improved, even raising the window if there is a window in that area. I think that the other thing that I would say is that schools are the cleanest and safest places for our children to be. period. It's just like school buses are the safest way to go to school because they're safe. And we have research to support that. In the buildings I've visited, and it's been over 8 different systems now, every school that I've been in has made incredible efforts to clean and sanitize frequently, to have stations where sanitation is available, masking, distancing. It is absolutely, it's been a huge effort. And so I think what we're going to do is we're going to try to start making more people, not making more people, but asking more people to come and visit schools and see how safe they are. I know my colleagues here have done that with many of their teachers that have been recalcitrant about this or concerned. I don't want to say recalcitrant, but concerned about going back into schools. But I've seen teachers in schools and they're fine and they're happy. And it's again, primarily here on the shore that we've seen these successes. So why is it okay here, but it's not okay in the central part of the state or the most northern part of the state? So I agree with you. We don't need more rules. Schools are clean and safe and probably better than some of the places where our kids are if they're not in affluent situations. So I'm working as hard as I can to try to counteract these declarations from teachers' unions. But I also have to believe in my heart of hearts, it's just not all the teachers. You know, I asked teachers in Worcester County, I said, hey guys, I said, I'm so glad to see you back. And Lou was there with me. And I said, you know, how do you feel that there are other teachers that say they won't come in the classroom? And one of the teachers quoted Mr. Taylor and said, Mr. Taylor says, we're not allowed to say anything bad about people. It's better just to be quiet. So I knew that they were all on board and they're frustrated too. So I'm working as hard as I can. You know, I'm happy to talk to you later about other strategies that maybe we could work on together. And I would like to invite any of you to walk in a school with me as I plan visits. We're getting ready to post the future visits on the website. I have one coming up in Talbot County the end of February. I've already been in Caroline County, been in Cecil County, been in Worcester County. So I'm looking forward to making those visits and maybe just having us all out and about and having the press there to show how clean and safe things are will give us some help. I'm hopeful. I'm sorry, that's not a very dramatic answer.
Well, actually, I thank you for the testimony, and I thank you and encourage you for anything that you can do to advance that cause and anything we can do to help. And I'm probably not going to chime in further in the hearings today, Mr. Chairman, but let me just thank the superintendents at each of our counties for the work you're doing. This is almost an impossible task. I'm an employer myself, and you know, watching what it's taking for us to operate. We're just a small business. You're obviously just huge employers, and the challenges you're facing, anything we can do to help. And Dr. Salmon, thank you for the testimony. I do appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
Dr. Salmon, this is Delegate Aaron. So I have a couple just brief questions. Do you have any state statistics on how we're doing in school, meaning how many people are passing or failing and that type of criteria? Do you have anything that's statewide?
We didn't add that to the first term metrics. We had a lot of other things we asked the systems for, but we're going to add that to the next term, which will be from this second quarter of school that we'll collect in March. So we'll have that information. We have some anecdotal evidence. We know that we've seen in Montgomery County was huge failure rates. So we're going to try to report on that in our next quarter assessment.
Based on that, now we're seeing, actually, I've heard numbers of 53% are passing. That means 47 are failing. Something, maybe not all the way through. But my other question would come, and this comes from somebody that sent something over to us, is, are we, when we look at this thing ending up this school year, because we're fast approaching the end of a school year, what are we doing about repeating classes? What are we doing about people that will fail and they will not meet the criteria for the next step up?
Well, that's a great question. I'm probably going to let my colleagues here answer that because I'm sure it'll vary by school system. I would just say, as a longtime educator, you know, I'd have to, especially at the high school level, you know, I'd have to hopefully provide something at the summer for those students to kind of get their learning back on track so that they don't have to repeat everything. But I think that will come with the extended programs we'll have this summer, maybe for some recovery of credits. I've also been asked about repeating grades, and we know that from the research that retaining students usually leads to very poor outcomes later on. So I think I'm going to defer to my colleagues, let you ask them those questions, but I think we have to be very cautious about how we deal with this disrupted learning and not place all the blame on our kids for the failure.
Is there any, and there may be, but is there anything, I've read where the University of Maryland, probably one of the better schools in our country, they're looking at doing some classes as pass-fail. Is that something the state is looking at?
Well, actually, that was something we did last spring. And most of the systems did do a modified grading system. So they did do that. We had a lot of pushback from parents on that, because they wanted their students to have grades if they were looking at their GPAs and those kinds of things. But this year, starting this year, we've gone back mostly to giving students grades. So we did do that prior to this school year.
Okay, last one for me, and then we'll move on to the next group. Senator Hershey brought up something about the students' mental health. What about the families? Have we done anything on that end?
Well, I know that we have, again, I get emails from families, and I know that a lot of them are also having issues with trying to keep up with learning at home and doing their jobs. We've had we know that nationwide moms have dropped out of the workforce, and that's creating a lot of stress at home financially and also emotionally. And I'm hoping that our local school systems, are also reaching out to their families. I know they probably are, but I'll let them answer that. But it is impacting all of us or all of them in a very demonstrative way. So thanks for bringing that up.
All right, thank you so much. Any other questions for Dr. Salmon? All right. Seeing none.
Yes, Delegate Aaronson, I have a question.
I'm sorry, we don't really do that from the audience, but we'll have to get to that, okay? That'll be at the end of the session. Moving forward, Dr. Salmon, thank you for your time.
You're welcome, and I'll stay on.
Okay, thank you. All right, next up, we have the Eastern Shore Maryland Educational Consortium. Mr. Andes, sir. Dr. Andes, I'm sorry, John.
Well, good morning, Delegate Arntz. This is Donna Hanlon, and good morning to all of our distinguished delegates and senators this morning. As I said, my name is Donna Hanlon, and I am honored to serve as the superintendent of Wicomico County Public Schools, and this year to serve as the president of the Eastern Shore of Maryland Education Consortium, representing all the 9 school systems on the Eastern Shore. First of all, thank you so much for all that you do to support public education, and we appreciate this time that we have with you this morning. Dr. Andes sent to all of you a copy of our 1-page document that describes our 2021 legislative priorities, and as you can see, he is now sharing his screen. I'm going to go through and just briefly talk about each one of them to you, and then allow my colleagues to introduce themselves and to make very brief comments about their local capital state funding requests. And then we would be happy to respond to any questions that you have, including anything further that you might have about the issues that you have already raised. So looking at those priorities, we have narrowed them to just 5, and they include the expansion of internet broadband connectivity in rural areas, excuse me. Support for this expansion will not only assist our school systems in a more efficient student engagement and remote learning, but will also assist our communities with connectivity as a whole. We have all learned through our experiences with the pandemic the importance of broadband connectivity, and even when the pandemic is behind us, we still see this as a real issue. The second legislative priority is seeking your support for continued funding for areas of the Blueprint for Maryland's Future, as we've already been receiving in FY20 and 21. As you know, we have received funding these past 2 years to enhance such areas as special education, to support struggling learners, to fund mental health coordinator, and to increase teachers' salaries. And we were very pleased to see that the governor's budget includes flat funding in those areas. And we simply ask that you keep the governor's budget intact to allow us to be able to continue the initiatives in our school systems that are well underway in those areas. The third area is student enrollment. And this priority is clearly unique to this year. With the challenges of COVID, we all recognize that the September 30th student enrollment count is not a reliable indicator of our total student enrollment or other student group counts that directly impact state and local funding of school systems. And the governor in his budget has recognized this issue as well. While his budget does use current formulas with our current enrollment counts to determine funding for the foundation program and compensatory education and other areas, he has added an other column to add funding through very generous supplemental hold harmless grants to make up for the losses that we would have experienced through the traditional funding formula. So again, we ask for your support in keeping the governor's budget intact to ensure that our school systems are held harmless in this unique situation for our school systems. I'll also add that we are very supportive of the language in the Budget Reconciliation and Finance Reporting Act. The language requires an increase by local government, if only $1, in local funding from FY21 in order for local school systems to receive the state's hold harmless grants. So in other words, the language requires local government to also hold school systems harmless during this unprecedented time. So while there may need to be some additional conversation and clarification on whether this is one-year language and simply requires an overall increase in funding, or if it means a per pupil increase, which would clearly have a major impact or be a huge lift for our local school system, or our local counties. At this point, we're just asking for your support in requiring counties to hold us harmless as well. The next area is local control. And we typically include this one because we believe strongly that our local boards of education need the autonomy and the flexibility to make decisions based upon the unique needs of our individual counties. So we're simply asking that you oppose any legislation that negatively impacts the authority of local boards and local superintendents. And finally, our last priority is support for capital funding. As all of you are aware, we have aging school buildings on the Eastern Shore, and we have many needs requiring systemic renovations and replacement facilities. And so we're asking for your continued support for traditional state funding for FY22 capital project requests that are listed on the back of this one-page document. And Dr. Andes, if you want to switch to that, I'll make a couple of more comments before I ask my colleagues to introduce themselves. But so the other area besides traditional state funding is that we ask that you continue to advocate for what is fair funding for small to mid-sized systems like those on the Eastern Shore when it comes to non-traditional funding for capital. For example, in the governor's proposed budget increases for capital projects. And if there's any chance to reconsider allocations proposed through the Build to Learn Act, we ask that you again consider what is fair and equitable for our small to mid-sized systems. You may recall in that legislation that 17 counties, including everyone on the Eastern Shore, were to receive only 11% of that funding in that legislation. So if there's any consideration to look again at those allocations, we would appreciate that. So before we go to questions that you may have, I'm going to ask each of my colleagues to introduce themselves and share briefly any comments on your capital requests. While I have the floor, I'll just share with you that Wicomico County is excited about our projects that we are requesting state funding for this year. Beaver Run Elementary School, our FY22 request is the last year of funding for this project. We're excited that construction is well underway for our replacement school, and we look forward to opening in 2022 on time and within budget. And then our second area is Mardella Middle and High School. And as you may know, we received state planning approval last spring for this project, and we're pleased to share that we have started the process of design just before the holidays. We've also initiated a request for qualifications for construction manager, and we're looking forward to moving into pre-construction on that project once design is completed and state funding for FY22 has been approved. So I will turn it over to my colleagues, and we'll go in the order listed on the page, starting with Caroline.
Yes, good morning. Thank you so much, Donna. As you can see here, we have Ridgely Elementary School roof replacement, but we also are finishing up our Greensboro Elementary project. And I do also want to give a shout out to Delegate Grice and Senator Hershey for their true commitment to Caroline County. Not only have they initiated, but they continue to support our district with capital bond bills. And they have just put one out for $500,000 to help us and assist us in building a new Judy Center, which will be on the same campus with our Greensboro Elementary School. We're very excited about the project, and I can't thank you enough for your continued support.
Cecil County.
Thank you, Donna, and good morning, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity to share what we're doing in Cecil. As many of you have likely seen, the new Chesapeake City Elementary School is nearing completion, on time, under budget, and we'll be ready for opening in September. So we're really excited about that. It's our second new elementary school in the last 2 years. So thank you to everyone. And then there's some systemics down there, HVAC systems, boiler replacement. There's a cooling tower process or a cooling tower system at the Bohemia Manor campus for Middle and High School. And that is a typo at the bottom. The new roof is for Elkton Middle School, not Elkton High School. And then closing it out, we are taking money. We've begun the design process for this coming spring for a new Northeast Middle School, which will not be reflected in any request for FY22, but certainly will be at the top of our list for FY23. And again, thank you for the opportunity.
Dorchester County.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Donna.
Dave, you're muted. There you go.
Yeah, I just saw it was muted again. Good morning, everyone. Our capital projects, we actually have half of Cambridge South Dorchester High School's roof completed. Interestingly, we've run into an issue with the whole fire alarm system at Cambridge South, something that we were not expecting. So no one's alarmed, it's working fine, but it's in dire need of replacement. And also there's since we had Chop Tank Elementary School on here, we've been able to handle that one and actually table that for a little bit later in possible 23. We're looking at South Dorchester K-8, which is over a 50-year-old building, and redesigning the HVAC system down there because that building is so old. I heard a lot of conversation about what we're planning on doing for summer school. We have upwards already of 7 weeks planned, which is almost an extra term that we're trying to work in for all 3 levels at elementary, middle, and high school. So that's just a start. And again, we're just scratching the surface, and I know all the other counties are doing the same thing. Thank you.
So Kent County isn't listed, but Dr. Couch, introduce yourself.
Yes, thank you. My name is Karen Couch. I'm Superintendent Kent County. We are completing 2 major renovation projects, and we do not have any capital requests, but I do want to also give a shout out to Senator Hershey, Representative Arns, Jacobs, and Grice for their support in securing bonds for our replacement of our track at Kent County High School. That was approved at the Board of Public Works yesterday, so we're looking forward to moving forward with with those projects. And we thank you very much for your support.
And Queen Anne County, I think Carla Pullen, Chief Operations Officer, is representing Dr. Kane.
Good morning. We have 2 systemic roof projects that are on our list of capital requests this year. The total amount, $2.8 million. We would be potentially looking for planning approval of a larger project in our county next year, the replacement or renovation of Centerville Middle School. And we appreciate the continued support in our county as well.
Somerset.
Good morning, everybody. John Gaddis, one project, Greenwood Elementary School. This will finish out a lot of work we've done there. The building envelope, meaning all new windows and doors will be done because we did a new HVAC system in a geothermal HVAC in 2015. RA has a roof, so this will wrap up a original building from 1961. And I want to thank Senator Croza and Delegate Otto for their support as we go through these projects and many things in Somerset County.
Thank you. I'm not sure. I know Dr. Griffith is probably not on the call. She is recovering from knee surgery. Is anyone on the call from Talbot County? Okay, so we will move to, last but not least, Worcester County.
Good morning, everyone. It's great to see everybody again. I want to thank everyone for your hard work and keeping our school systems throughout the state and obviously on the shore here in the forefront as you make decisions, and we greatly appreciate that. We have one project on the table. I want to first thank you. We just completed Shaw Elementary School, a brand new elementary school, a little over 100,000 square feet. And we are grateful for your support of that in the past. And now as we move to a renovation and addition, well, more of an addition at Stephen Decatur Middle School, where we will be adding 24,000 square feet of building to that school. And we're excited. We are already moving down the tracks on that and look to break ground late fall of this year. So thank you for your support. One thing I do want to say, since I have 30 seconds left, please keep in the forefront the broadband situation for all of us. That connectability is paramount. I know I have spoken to Senator Carozza and Delegate Hartman and Delegate Otto, and I thank all 3 of you for your support of Worcester County Public Schools and of our counties. But that is something that I think we desperately need to be a priority as we move our school systems forward, not only now, but for the future. So again, I thank you for the time this morning. And again, thank all of you for your hard work and supporting public education here in Maryland.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. So Senator Arntz, thank you again for your support and to the delegation and to your dedication for our 9 counties. And at this point, we're happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much. We appreciate the update. First off, we have Senator Eckhart.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and to the consortium, to our superintendents, thank you for your hard work during a very difficult time. And I know I've been to several of the schools and I've talked with many of you, so I appreciate your good work. I do have a question. I have a couple of comments. And I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, but first of all, I'm the new addition to the capital budget, so I need the specifics on capital budget as we work on it because the Senate has the budget first this year. Second off, we worked on the governor's budget, his introduction of additional funds for recovery for the economy. And I can tell you that the Senate, we passed that bill out of our committee yesterday, and the Senate added another few million dollars for summer school catch-up for 25,000 students, in-person education, job training, and educational supports for DJS. So that has to get through the whole Senate and then through the House. But we think you all probably need those additional resources. So my question to you all is, before I put another amendment on that recovery package, what would be helpful that would be almost shovel ready to be able to address the broadband issue. I know that you all had funding for hotspots, but we found in many of our counties they were woefully inadequate. The recovery now are dollars that would go immediately out the door to be used by the end of the year. So please think about that. You might not be able to answer it right now, but if you could get back to me with those specifics so that we can figure out what would be helpful by the end of the year. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
All right, next up, we have Senator Carozza.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I first want to thank our state superintendent, all the local superintendents, and also your teams for the tremendous efforts and adjustments that you've had to make to continue the learning process during a very difficult period during COVID-19. And we have heard about the negative impact of the disruption in learning. And I also want to underscore my commitment to work with this delegation on what you have highlighted as a priority in all constituencies, not just education, with rural broadband access. I also wanted to comment and just to pass on to those teachers who have really, some of them have really gone out of their way and found some creative ways to stay connected with their students. And I hope you would pass that on, that is recognized. There is one area of concern that has become exacerbated during COVID-19 with the increase of involvement of parents in the learning process during virtual learning with their children. Parents naturally have more questions about their children's education and sometimes are highlighting problems or issues with both process and curriculum. In some cases, these issues have festered to the point that lawyers and legal memos are used to resolve issues. And I think we all can agree that a better approach is to improve communications and to ensure that we have processes in place for early and meaningful parental involvement. So I'm interested, I've talked to a couple of my local superintendents about this. I'm interested in your views on how we could strengthen the trust between our school systems and parents during this most difficult period.
Senator Carozza, I'll begin and then we can, I'm sure others, my colleagues will weigh in, but we have actually seen an increase in parental involvement in our system with parents being very engaged in their children's education because they're in the home watching that on a daily basis. And so there has been increased interaction between teachers and parents in regards to children's education. So, and then in other cases, we are, administrators are reaching out to parents who have concerns. It's really important that it's one-on-one communication and that we are communicating, meeting the individual needs of each parent as those issues arise. But I'll let my other colleagues weigh in.
Anything else, Senator?
Yeah, I was really looking, it's more the issues when we resort to legal memos and lawyers on how we can improve that process. And, you know, Dr. Gaddis and I have had that conversation. And if he cares to comment, or any other local school superintendent.
Sure, Senator, thank you. I'll comment because I'm dealing with this right now. I think you're looking at the basis of how things are set up. In other words, when you're talking about curriculum, you have a decision that's made by the superintendent. And the best way is for parent, you know, I've had some things challenged. I have to make a decision. The best way is for folks to come in and simply talk and to sit down. But what happens is you have parents that file appeals. And when any decision a superintendent makes is appealable, well, then it goes right to the board. And as soon as that happens, it brings in the board attorneys. And so I understand what you're saying, and we have talked about this. So we're looking at ways to stop those appeals and to involve parents a little bit earlier, because I think what you're getting to is parents are finding out more and more about education because they're sitting in on the Zooms and they're hearing some things that from their faith perspective, from their political perspective or their belief perspective they disagree with, especially in high school where we are teaching both sides of an argument. And so now that they hear this, we have to find that balance, because many are saying to me, well, I don't want that in the curriculum. And they don't understand it's a state standard that we quickly address and we move on, but we give a historical perspective. So what it really comes down to me is better communication and extending ourselves, but also saying to parents, showing parents through teacher training and professional development that we offer a balanced approach, and that, like everything we've gone through as a nation, we are talking about both perspectives, both sides of things. But it all comes down to basic communication. But inherently, the process we have is brings lawyers in. And I'm not saying I like that. I don't like that. But if someone appeals my decision, it automatically goes that route. So we're just dealing with the policies and things that are in place that have been in place historically based on how the system works.
And I appreciate that, Dr. Gaddis. You gave me quite a bit of your time earlier on this issue. And just one last comment, Mr. Chair, it's that if there are ways earlier in the process that we can engage parents in a meaningful way, I think it would head off some of these legal matters. So I would ask the school superintendents to consider looking at maybe processes earlier on in the process to involve the parents in a meaningful role. Thank you.
And Senator Cruz, if I could just make one more comment, because I think Dr. Gaddis and I are very aware of the cases that you're referring to. That has been done. Those processes are in place, and those parents have been over and over again communicated with and sat down and had those conversations that you're asking about.
All right, next up we have delegate sample use.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all the superintendents again for your efforts and all that you've done to ensure that our schools are functioning to the best of its ability. I have an ask of you. House Bill 496. It is a primary and secondary education dealing with mental health services. It's also titled as Counselors Not Cops Act. The reason I bring this up is because certainly I want to know how our Eastern Shore superintendents feel or looking at that particular bill. It deals with taking $10 million out of a particular fund, school-based resource officers basically, and then moving it into health counselors, to which I believe we certainly need those health counselors, but I just need to ensure that we are not taking one away, safety to promote having behavioral health services, which in my opinion is equally important. Do you have any thoughts on that? And if you don't, you can send us an update because that bill is forthcoming.
So Speaker Pro Tem Sample Hughes, thank you for the comments and the great question. I think that's an important topic, and I think it really has to be both. We have counselors, we've added, at least in Wicomico County where funding has been available, we've added social workers, but our school resource officers are there for prevention. They are not there for intervening in discipline or when there needs to be counseling done. They are sometimes there. They're great role models for students to see that law enforcement can be a good thing, they can have great relationships with law enforcement. And so I would agree with you that we can't do away with school resource officers for the safety and for the benefit that we see from them, but I'll open it up to my colleagues as well.
Dr. Hanlon, I'll jump in. It's Jeff Lawson from Cecil County. I would support Donna's comments and thank you for the inquiry. I believe we wrote the first grant in the state of Delaware to get an SRO in a high school back in 1996. And I will tell you, I've seen it done well. In the past 3 years, Cecil County has been part of a grant with the National Institute of Justice through the University of Maryland, where all of our SROs, who by and large are county deputies, there is one local municipality who provides SRO support, but they've all undergone training to really help them, because coming through police academies, they typically aren't developed as, and I think this might be reflective of their training as well, frankly, but they typically aren't developed as therapeutic resources, if you will. You know, they're trained to be police officers, and the training that our deputies have received through University of Maryland has been very well received by the SROs. Frankly, I think there's a myth out there that the SROs really are, you know, if you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail, that old adage kind of thing. They do want to get better, and they do want to be able to serve our students as the best they can. So I would fully concur with Donna's remarks, is it would be wonderful just to have both.
Any other questions from the delegation? I actually have a real quick question, and this is probably for all of you. You know, we've seen a lot of things change with COVID. I'm sure you all recognize that even more than I do. Have you all had a group discussion on how to possibly glean some things from this pandemic that could make our systems better, like changing the way we use districts, whatever, maybe doing a Eastern Shore district or something that would better allow you to address these types of problems in the future?
Well, we, through the pandemic, we have been meeting, I think for a while we were meeting weekly. We are now meeting every other week and discussing what you've described, maybe not specifically, but a lot of issues. And I think we all agree that we'll come out stronger on the other end of this. The one thing that we are working on together is a regional virtual program for the Eastern Shore. We will be piloting that. Dr. Andes has been instrumental in helping us get that off the ground. We have now engaged with a consultant. We've hired her to help us get a pilot off the ground with funding from MSDE so that we can continue with a regional approach to virtual learning when, you know, even beyond the pandemic. But I will, again, open it up to any other responses from my colleagues.
Are there any other comments? Hearing none. Well, it looks like we've pretty much covered our agenda as far as this go. I'd like to really take a great thank you all for showing up and coming and giving us the information. Dr. Salmon, once again, always a pleasure to have you come to our delegation meetings. And I will say that I think that if anybody out there maybe has any questions in the future, get to your delegate, get to somebody that can actually help you with those questions. We'll move it forward through the system. Recognitions, can we hear from our federal delegation? Does anybody have anything to say from that?
Good morning, everyone. This is Melissa Kelly with Senator Van Hollen's office. Good to see everyone. Thank you for your cooperation throughout the last year. I know we met with the senator several times to address the broadband initiative. He did just reintroduce legislation for the PAC to fully fund Title I. I would just encourage you to continue to communicate with our offices on anything you need at the federal level, and we're here to support you at the state level as well. So keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Hey, Delegate, this is Kimberly Cradaville from Senator Ben Cardin's office. I would just like to say thank you as a parent as well for all you're doing for the kids on the shore. And I echo Melissa's words to please keep in touch with us, and anything that you need, reach out, please. Thank you.
And I think we have my namesake, Mike Arntz, in the audience from our good congressman's office. Michael?
Yes, hi, Steve, and everyone else. Don't really have anything to add regarding federal. You know, obviously the House is out of session this week, so there's really not a lot going on. I do have something I'd like to bring up to maybe discussion with the whole group, and this is really coming from me more personally than a federal issue. And it seems that, and I talked to a lot of teachers, and I talked to a lot of parents in our district who seem to express that there is a conflict, maybe the best word to use, between the need and the desire of parents and children to go back to in-school teaching as opposed to remote, and then what's perceived at least to be a resistance. And first I want to say, I do know a lot of teachers, and I know teachers are working very hard, even doing the best they possibly can, doing teaching remotely. But there seems to be some resistance from a lot of teachers and the NEA regarding going back to in-school teaching. And I wonder about comments from the group in that regard.
Well, is there one person, this isn't typically what we do at the end of the thing, is there one person who would just give a quick comment? We're at our end of our meeting, towards our end of our meeting.
I will just say, Delegate Ernst, that I think that that's the reality that we've all been living in for months and months and months, that there is no win-win in this situation. Everyone has such strong opinions about whether we are in school or not in school, but we're all working in our individual counties and Dr. Salmon at the state to give people accurate information based upon the science, that our schools are safe and that our mission is students. So I don't know, Dr. Salmon or any others, if you want to make any other further comments.
Okay, you know what, I guess just for housekeeping here, in the future, we put our agenda out every week relatively early. If there are some particular questions anybody might have to answer out there, but we do not have the time to go into great detail as far as making a public question and answer session. But we'd be happy to address that either offline or online with you in the future. That being said, we are at our time, and any other comments from the delegation? Delegate Otto, you can raise your hand either like that, or you can actually go on a computer and do that. Go ahead.
It's easier to raise my hand.
Well, I got to be able to see
screen. I just want to thank all the superintendents for the dedication work they've done to go through these challenging times, and I have full confidence that you all were trying to provide the best opportunity for education to our students, and we have some catch up to do, and we'll figure out how to do it. And Dr. Salmon, I appreciate you sticking with the job. I don't think you had planned to stay as long as you had in challenging times, but I appreciate the fight you've given, and we're here for you.
Thank you.
All right, I don't see any other hands. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for attending, and we look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good job. Thank you.
Thank you.